it on. Real set? Good afternoon. This is the House Rules Committee. It's January 14th, 2021. We have the distinction of being the first House committee to be working in the new year. I would like to welcome everyone here to House Rules, all those who have been on it before and some new additions. Before I ask for the roll to be called, I would like to just say that we have a very, hopefully, we have a very interesting year before us. We have some challenges. I know we're going to meet those challenges. We have some great talent in the House of Representatives, and I think this is going to be a very productive year. So I wish everyone a happy new year, and most importantly, a healthy one. Just a matter of housekeeping. To make everyone comfortable within the confines of this particular venue, everyone who's in this room, representatives, members of the staff, etc., all have to wear masks at all times, including when you're speaking. If you see me pulling mine above the nose, it's because it keeps falling down. But everyone has to keep the mask on during the proceedings for today. I'd like the clerk, Anthony Palantonio, to call the roll, please.
Chairman, Dr. J. Perry.
Here.
First Vice Chairman William O'Brien. Here. Second Vice Chairperson Cleo Bella Wilkinson.
Here.
Representative Samuel Azanaro.
Here.
Representative Julie A. Casamaro.
Here.
Representative Grace Diaz.
Here.
Representative Catherine S. Kazarian.
Here.
Representative Brian Patrick Kennedy. Here. Representative Alex Mazalkowski. Representative Joseph McNamara.
Here.
Representative Brian Newberry.
Here.
Representative Robert P. Phillips. Present. Representative David J. Place. Present. Representative Patricia Ray Serpa.
Present.
Representative Evan P. Hanley.
Here.
Representative Scott Slater. Representative Anastasia Williams.
Present.
Thank you, Mr. Palantonio. Let me just welcome, I think we have two new members, Whip Kazarian and Representative Shanley. Am I correct? Welcome to House Rules. So we have a number of people who are going to be testifying in different venues, some in person.
I think we have like Philippi here saying ex officio, so.
I did not see him. Oh, Representative, I'm sorry, Leader Filippi. You're here ex officio, I assume.
Yes, Chairman, thank you for
I
having me.
apologize for not recognizing you or seeing you.
No apology necessary, thank
Okay,
you.
I'm getting a little older by the day.
Hopefully a little wiser, too.
Well, oh, wise enough not to run in the Republican Party. I'm going to start by, this is actually a two-part hearing. There are two hearings, today and a week from today. With that in mind, House 5002, which was the bill that I put in regarding updates on the rules, I just wanted to, where's my notes? In front of me. I just wanted to briefly go over the changes in 5002 as opposed to what the rules were the last 2 years before we begin. And I'll just take a few moments. So with regard to 5002, this resolution updates and changes the existing rules in the following ways. First, it updates various legislative dates and deadlines, as is typical for every revision of the House rules. Second, it adds two new standing committees, a Committee on Innovation, Internet, and Technology, which would address issues relating to cybersecurity, data, and internet privacy, and emerging technology, including technological Innovation in State Government, and a committee on state government and elections, which would consider legislation relating to state affairs, governmental departments and divisions, administrative procedures, open meetings, election laws, and constitutional amendments. Third, it changes several existing committees. It splits the former Committee on Health, Education, and Welfare, HEW, into two distinct committees, a Committee on Education and a Committee on Health and Human Services. This change will allow each of these committees to be better positioned to hear legislation focusing on these distinct and important issues confronting our state. The former Committee on Municipal Government will now be known as the Committee on Municipal Government and Housing. This change reflects the importance that the House places upon the issue of housing currently facing our communities. Number 5, a new rule would allow members to keep up to 3 bills alive for the second year of a legislative term. This rule would allow a member to avoid the process of reintroduction of the member's priority legislation over the course of the member's 2-year term. In response, number 6, in response to the difficult legislative conditions caused by the pandemic, a new rule provides the Speaker with discretion to trigger certain temporary legislative procedures during a public health or other emergency. The temporary procedures would include authorization to conduct remote meetings of House committees. This temporary rule would allow members to participate and vote via video conferencing or telephone, as long as the member's identity could be verified. Witnesses would also be able to participate in similar manner. Under this new rule, committees would vote by roll call. Also, authorization for members to vote on the House floor by proxy. Once a quorum has been met by the physical presence of 38 members of, by the physical presence of 38 of the members, the Speaker could temporarily allow members who cannot attend the session to have their majority or minority leaders vote on certain matters on their behalf. The member would indicate his or her preference on calendar items by emailing the House clerk and the majority or minority leader prior to the commencement of a daily session. Utilization of these temporary procedures would continue until the Speaker rescinds them at the conclusion of the public emergency. The allowance of these temporary procedures are intended to allow the House certain flexibility to conduct the people's business while confronting the new realities of social distancing, quarantine, and isolation. And let me just say, for the record, that these new changes, which are certainly improvements, and putting the House forward during 2021, were presented and put forth by House Speaker Sakachi and House Democratic Majority Leader Chris Blazejewski, after listening to many of the members in the chamber and their concerns for the new rules. So I would just like to thank Speaker Sakachi and Leader Blazejewski for their input and listening to all the members of the House. With that having been said and formulating the template upon which we are going to work, I would like to call the first witness we have today who has some testimony is Representative Rebecca Kislak. Representative Kislak, welcome to House Rules. I wish you were a little closer up, but because of social distancing, we have to have you out there.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. It's really nice to see you all today, and I'm really looking forward to working with you and the new leadership and our new rules. Rules plus the culture of our House is how we do things, and I'm looking forward to continuing positive changes in both. With that in mind, I have introduced 6 potential rules changes to raise for conversation here tonight. I want to testify on all of the bills that are posted. I support the rules change package that Chairman Corvese has introduced. I'm grateful in particular for the work that's been done so that we can testify and vote remotely in committee and by proxy for floor votes. I have some clarifying questions about the proxy process as described in the legislation, and I hope that we can discuss this as the committee and the body that will be voting on these. I haven't yet spoken to the majority leader, but I wonder whether we might appoint our own proxies for the purpose of proxy voting and be in communication with the person who holds our proxy throughout session in case something is discussed on the floor while we're watching from home, so that we can determine if we want to change our votes during session as well. So I think those are two things that need to be clarified. I don't know whether the majority leader wants to be juggling 10 proxies in communication with people, and hopefully there'll only be 1 or 2 people who are absent at a time. So that's the first question I have, is whether we might permit individual members to appoint our own proxies. A second, yes. No, Chairman, this is on your bill that you just introduced, on your legislation. I support all of the changes that are in the bill that you put forward, but I have a clarifying question about the proxies, which is what I
can
raised.
tell you that as of now, because I asked the same question,
Yeah.
once the proxy is given to the majority minority leader, it cannot be changed,
Right.
just as of now.
Yeah, so I think that that may be something the committee might want to discuss, because we might have a vibrant debate on the floor. I'm also concerned about giving blanket proxy authority for floor amendments that we might not know about at the time that we give the proxy authority. So I have
Sure.
one recommendation, that we get to assign our own proxy, and that the committee discuss whether we might be able to change the votes by email and text communication with our appointed proxy during session. I don't know what the committee will decide, but I think those are important questions to discuss that I wanted to raise. I also wonder whether we might want to permit remote participation of members who are ill even after the public health emergency is over by video link-up participation, because I know that before COVID, all of us, right, we would come in with a little cold because we were elected to do the job of the people, and we can't do that anymore. So we can't come in if we're feeling a little under the weather. I don't think that's going to change after most of us have been vaccinated. I could be wrong, but I think we want to create a situation where we keep our germs to ourselves at home, and I think that being able to participate in committees remotely, even after the public health emergency, is something that would be well worth our time to discuss further. So those are my 2 comments about Chairman Corvesi's legislation. I support all of the bills that are being discussed tonight. I support the resolution submitted by Representatives Speakman, Carson, and Cortvrend, adding more sponsors' names to be listed publicly. I think that all of the sponsors should be listed publicly. It's all public information. I understand that we have a software issue that will now allow us to have 10 names listed, and I hope that we keep working towards having everybody's names easily accessible so that the public might know easily all of the co-sponsors of bills. I strongly support their proposed resolution. Similarly, I support Representative Knight's proposed amendment to the rules that every member is entitled to be seated on a minimum of 2 committees. And in fact, I asked Legislative Counsel to draft up for me legislation that would have required assignment to a major and a minor committee for each representative. That is a little bit, we don't seem to have, I also support the additional committees that we're setting up, and thank the chairman for putting those in his bill. I think that's a great idea. It also means we don't really have major and minor committees anymore, so I didn't submit my legislation, and I support Representative Knight's bill on that matter. And then I submitted 6 bills that are all aimed at opening up the legislative process to make it easier for all of us to bring the voices of the people we represent to the State House. These are all incremental changes that would help us move to a more participatory and democratic process. None of these are new ideas, and they're not unique to Rhode Island either. In the recent past, Representatives O'Grady, Shanley, Newberry, Last year, 2 years ago, the Reform Caucus, including me, all of the people other than Chairman Corvesi who are submitting rules today, and a few members of this committee were a part of a group that submitted rules 2 years ago. So 6 rules to consider from me, and I think we'll probably see more in the coming days. 5006, I submitted before I saw the leadership rules resolution. This resolution would ensure remote participation in hearings for members of the public. And as I just discussed before, it would include video testimony for members of the public, and it would be ideal if we had the technical capabilities to make that happen. Telephonic communication and testimony is also good at this time, and I hope we keep working towards making our hearings accessible through video testimony for members of the public also, and consider making it so that members of committees can participate remotely if their health requires, even following a public health emergency. 5007 would ensure that a decision to suspend the rules requires the decision of 2/3 of the member of the House and not solely the majority and the minority leaders. I said at the beginning that rules plus culture equals how we do things. I think it's been a really positive change that since I've been elected, I have not seen the rules suspended. I think we should continue that, and but there also might be a time when we need to suspend the rules, and I don't know what might come up, but I think that we, as voting members of the body, should be the ones to be on the record and to decide together to do that. So 5007 would do that. 5008, 9, and 10 would get us all in the practice of voting on more bills. One of them makes a discharge petition earlier. We would be able to collect signatures anywhere we want, and bills with 38 signatures on the discharge petition would come to the floor. Another resolution would let bill sponsors insist that committees vote on their bills up or down. And it's something that we haven't done, at least in my memory. The last of these ensures that once bills get out of committee, they're scheduled for a floor vote in a timely fashion. And then finally, 5011, one of the best things that we've changed in the last 2 years was the requirement to post bills for 24 hours before we're voting on them. It's good for members, for advocates, for the general public. It was so frustrating to be an advocate sitting in a hearing and getting ready to talk about a bill and then being told, we're actually considering a sub A, a substitute bill that you don't have in front of you, but you should testify on this language that we're not even really telling you about and you can't see. So that doesn't happen anymore. It's amazing. It's great. This resolution, 5011, would amend the rules so that it would make sure we post the budget in the same way. So another step forward towards open, transparent government. I'm sure there will be even more good proposals popping up this week. I see that Rep. Lombardi has submitted a resolution that would create 12-year term limits for House leadership positions. I think rotating leadership positions is a great idea, and I support his proposal as well. And I'm looking forward to talking with all of you, with my colleagues on the Rules Committee and our fellow representatives, to ensure that we adopt good rules that support a culture of open and participatory process so that we can bring our constituents' concerns to the People's House. Thank you so much for your time and consideration.
Thank you very much, Representative Kislak. Are there any questions of Representative Kislak? Representative Brian Newberry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's not so much questions, just comments. I figure I'll just go through some of the amendments that you proposed, some of which I agree with, some of which I don't. And I have a question really for the chair, anyone in the room about one of them. I'll get to that last. I think number 5007 is the one that I disagree with the most strongly, and you imagine some of the reasons why, but I think the last 2 years, I give Leader Filippi a lot of credit for standing up and not suspending the rules. I think we saw that it can work without suspending the rules. In fact, I think the last, couple of years really, we got through session without any of these long late night sessions. I think with the Speaker's legal counsel, as Danica did back at least in 2019, before COVID hit, did a very good job of managing the calendars. And I think with that, there's very minimal need to suspend the rules. And I do think it's something that it just streamlines it to give the majority and minority leader the power to do it. I don't think there's need to have a vote by the body on something that's not typically going to be controversial. So I don't think there's need for that. I think 5008 is a good idea. I think 509, I just wanted some history here. Essentially, and I haven't looked at the wording, but essentially 509 having to do with, I'm sorry, let me get the numbers wrong. 509, I actually spoke to Representative Kislak about yesterday, or texted about. And I understand the intent of that, but I think there's some practical problems with it. And the main one is that, and I haven't paid as much attention the last couple of years to the mechanics of what gets put on the calendar as I used to. But back when I was minority leader, I remember speaking to Richard Rispolo, Speaker's Legal Counsel back then, and there's some reasonings why, and the Speaker's Legal Counsel typically sets the calendar. That's how de facto works. And there's sometimes reasons why they space out things. They're not necessarily huge reasons. Sometimes they might have 8 bills come out of a municipal government committee early in session, and they don't want to put all 8 on the same day, still space them out. So I understand you want to get bills heard in a timely fashion. I think for the most part, the real issue in this body has been getting a bill heard in committee and voted on. I've rarely seen a problem where a bill comes out of committee and then doesn't get heard in relatively recent fashion. And as a practical matter, because the majority leader has the power to essentially continue the calendar anyway, if this rule were put in effect, there'd be workarounds. And again, so I understand your intent, but I don't think it's necessary. Rule number 5010, is the one about getting bills heard and actual substantive votes. I just want to point out, I wasn't here at the time, but I do know the history of this. There's very few people here who were. I'm not sure anybody, I guess Representative Williams was here for this, or was your first term. Former Speaker Harwood, that was a rule change that he made in agreement with then Minority Leader Wayne Salisbury, and that rule change worked fine. It was under Speaker Murphy that rule change was essentially rescinded for reasons that, again, predate my time. But I think that's a rule that should be in our rules. I think that people should be able to vote more substantively in committee. So I support that. And finally, the last one, 5011, I think is also a good idea. I know why the budget bill is exempt from this. The budget bill is exempt from this for practical reasons, because the budget bill at the end of the day, and anybody who's served on finance, and I've sat in this room, not recently, but in several years, I sat in this room when the budget bill came out, and it would be out 10 o'clock to be printing off the printer. And the reason was there were always all these negotiations going on with stakeholders, the Senate, and once everyone sort of reached an agreement at the leadership level, they put it out and they wanted it done. And there's a concern that if the bill sits out there, all those same people that are clamoring for changes, all the stakeholders, all the lobbyists, all the this, that, and the other thing, are going to just create more chaos for the next 24 hours. I get that, but part of our job is to put a stop to that. And I think it's unfair to I've always thought it's unfair to the members of the Finance Committee to force them to vote on a bill that comes out the last minute. I know people who sit on finance. I know Rep. Slater's here, and I've had this discussion with him. He talked about this on the House floor. If you sit on finance and you go to all the hearings, you're really not surprised by what's in that final budget bill. But still, even if you're not surprised, I think the public is surprised and should have some ability to look at it before it's voted in finance. It makes us look bad not to do that. So I think that's a good rule change as well. So some of your changes I agree with, some I do not. I appreciate the intent because I think there's some, I think the rule changes in your bill, Chairman Corvese, are good ones. So in general, I think we're moving in the right direction in this body, but I think we can go on more.
Representative Newberry, thank you for your comments, and everything will be taken into consideration.
And sorry, I had a question. The issue about the 10 sponsors, just a practical, I don't care how many sponsors show up in the journal. I know that the reason it's been 5 is because the software only allows 5 to show. Has that been changed?
From what I understand, I think there will be the ability to put 10 names on the bill.
Okay. I don't really care, frankly, but if it was a software issue in the past, I guess it could be 10, but whatever.
Any other questions? Representative Kislak, I'm sorry. Leader, did you have a question?
A brief comment.
Leader Filippi.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And we all know how important the rules is, and I appreciate all the counsel you've given me over the years and helped me out understanding how the body works, especially when I was a freshman coming here. So thank you very much. On 5007, the elimination of the consent of the majority and minority leaders for the suspension of the rules, I just want to add something. I agree with Representative Newberry. One of the benefits we have by requiring the majority and minority leader consent rather than a 2/3 vote is that if the ripcord needs to be pulled and the rules need to be unsuspended, either the majority leader or the minority leader at that point can essentially pull the escape hatch and stop the whole process. if we've suspended the rules by 2/3, I don't know what the procedure is at that point to unsuspend the rules. I kind of see the consent of the majority and minority leader as almost a safety mechanism. If things start getting out of control, a minority party leader or majority leader party can stop it. If it's voted by 2/3, how do we unsuspend them? Do we have to vote by 2/3 again? If that's the case, a minority party wouldn't be able to stop it. So I see this as actually preserving good government and providing a safety valve. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Leader. I think also having the majority leader, my own personal opinion, having both the majority leader and or the minority leader have that ability. Also, you're also the stopgap for your members between what could happen and what won't happen. So, any other questions of Representative Kislak? Representative Kislak, thank you very much for your participation today, and your
Thank you.
comments were very well received. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Oh, Representative Azanaro?
Yes, just a comment on the changes that you had put in, Chairman. The one that got me a little bit boggled is the 3 bills that you can hold for the next session. So my problem, I think, this year is that most of us put bills in last year, and March 11th or 12th, bang, everything stopped. So I know I had a bunch of bills that never got, they were held for further study and never came before a committee for a vote. And I'm sure that other people that have put in 50 bills, they're not around. So what do we do in that situation?
Well, if these, again, my interpretation of this and the intent behind it is the clock will stop this year. The clock will start this year. If these rules are approved by the House of Representatives, then bills you put in this year, of the bills you put in, you would get 3 for consideration to hold over to 2022. I think that as far as 2020, I think that's a moot point. I think the clock would start now.
So just so I'm clear, any bills that were introduced in 20, you have a right to move them without having, or you don't?
No, you would have to resubmit all of them.
Resubmit,
And at the
okay.
end of this legislative session, those 3 you feel are a priority that have not passed, if I read this correctly and the intent is correct, they would go over to 2022. 3 of them from this year, nothing from last year.
Okay.
Speaker Pro Tem Kennedy?
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, also, I think it should be made very clear, too. The fact is, we are elected for a 2-year term. That means if you move something over from this year into next year, and then you submit new legislation next year, that doesn't automatically allow you to bring that into the following year, because you are here for a 2-year term,
Right.
and only a 2-year term. So I think that may need to be clarified with some of our members who might think that this is just perpetual, that every
Right.
term
Right.
you get to bring things over to the following.
It would be for every session, which is
Right.
2 years.
Exactly.
Thank you. Let me perform my first mea culpa of the year. Chairwoman Williams apparently has been trying to get my attention. Chairwoman Williams, my apologies. Did you have a question for Representative Kislak?
No, I had a follow-up question based on the conversation that Representative Azanaro.
I'm sorry, go, proceed.
Thank you. With regards to your legislation, the number of bills, the 3 bills that you could carry over, what is the logistic for just 3 bills opposed to 5 bills?
I believe it's to cut down on inventory. You don't want to get you don't want to inundate the system, nor do you want to inundate the committees. But I think 3 is a legitimate number. That can be discussed, but I think 3 is a reasonable number to hold over.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions? Thank you, Representative Kislak. Huh? Representative Diaz.
Thank you, Chairman. Happy to back to again to Rule
We're happy to
Committee.
see you here, and you look healthy, and you look
Sorry.
COVID-free.
Thank you so much. Chairman, in reference of the same comment Rep. Asanaro mentioned about the 3 bills carrying over, I'm here for a long time, and I see a lot of stuff. I see, unfortunately, a state rep who died in the first year. If we face situation like that, and after somebody is elected, pass, the bills that they may be with the intention to carry over, or they carry over, we disappear with that person, right? It's not something like somebody get elected in a special election.
I don't think the bill, with all due respect, I don't think the bill dies with the rep.
No, I don't mean die. I don't mean the process of passing is not
No,
longer in place.
I understand, but remember, there are also usually co-sponsors to that legislation.
So that we pass to the co-sponsors in the same way?
Well, the bill would still be in the queue of the system. It would
Okay.
still be a part of the inventory of the individual committee that the bill is in. That bill would be taken up, and the co-sponsors could always take that up.
Is that in the rule that the co-sponsor can carry over? Okay, but I just want to be clear because situations can happen in the future. Okay, thank you,
Okay.
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Any other questions? Representative Phillips.
Just so people that are listening or watching on TV and that want to know, if you go to 5002, page 10, lines 9 through 17 at least, that clarifies what Speaker Pro Tem Kennedy was saying. It has to be within the 2-year term that we are currently elected to, not carrying from the second year of our term into the third year if we get reelected. So that's just a clarification so people that are either listening or watching, they can look it up on the bill.
Again, I think the clock would start every session. Any other questions? Representative Kislak, thank you. I see we have Representative Knight here. Representative Knight, welcome to House Rules. I see you have an amendment here. Would you like to proceed?
Yes, please. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and hello to all my colleagues. It's nice to see you in person. So I put in this rule, which is simple. It basically says that any elected member of the House of Representatives would have a right to be assigned to 2 standing committees, not less than 2 standing committees. They could waive that right if they wanted to with a letter to the Speaker of the House. And the reason why I put it in is because although it's often said that you can't take the politics out of politics, you can sort of minimize the interference with the politics with some of the substantive work that we need to do around here. Each of us represents roughly between 14 and 15,000 Rhode Islanders. And I think when those 14 or 15,000 Rhode Islanders vote to send someone up here to the General Assembly to be their voice, then they have a reasonable expectation that that person will be able to meaningfully participate in the conversations that we have up here. And by having a minimal assignment to 2 committees, then we can ensure that regardless of political differences that might be in play at any given time during the session, that each rep will have the opportunity to substantively participate in our committees. You know, as someone who spent a year on a committee that dealt primarily with marriage solemnizations and license plate issues, I can tell you that was no fun. And I think this is a small but meaningful change that we could employ to improve the democratic process here in the House of Representatives. I think you have a lot of good ideas on the table for you to consider going forward, and thank you for your work on the topic of rules.
Thank you, Representative Knight. Any questions of Representative Knight? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
So I believe that, Representative Chairman McNamara.
Thank you, Chairman Kavesi. For the general public that are watching, I just would like to mention one, in my eyes, one of the most important sections of the rules that you have proposed, Mr. Chairman, and that is 10B. No member is permitted to attack another member of the House personally, nor make false statements or question the integrity of another member. In light of the civility that we have seen and not seen in Washington, I believe this is one of the most important rules of the House, and I am extremely pleased that it is included. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Chairman McNamara. I think that propriety is important when we're conducting the people's business. I don't believe there are any other reps present who have any amendments before us, but I know that there are some who will be testifying remotely. Chris, Tony, Representatives Speakman, Carson, and Cortravin, are they going to be? Are they ready? Now, are they all individually, or is it together? Are they individual? Okay. So we'll take Representative Speakman, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. You can hear me?
Yes, we can, Representative Speakman. It's a pleasure to have you before House Rules.
Thank you very much. Thank you for accommodating us remotely. I'm here to speak on behalf of a bill that I am, a change that I am proud to sponsor along with Representative Carson and Cortravin. It's a small change, but I think it's an important change. It's the change that Representative Newberry mentioned about allowing 10 co-sponsors to be noted in the record. That he's correct that it was apparently a technological problem that has since been resolved. And I share Representative Kislak's dream that all co-sponsors will eventually someday be recognized in the record, but we're apparently not quite there yet. And I trust that we will continue to work on that. I'd also like to thank Rep. Cortravin and Rep. Carson for all of the thinking that we've done together on the rules in general, and all the talking that I've done with Rep. Knight and Rep. Kislak along the way too. So this is, again, just the 10 co-sponsors would be listed on the bill and in the journal. And that is the extent of my, what is it, H5003. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Speakman. Chairwoman Williams, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Do I put the question to her?
Yes, she can hear you.
Okay. Representative Speakman, right now we have 5 signatures on the bills. Is it not a fact that if, in fact, you have more than 5, while the top 5 are listed, the others is available to be seen if you so look for it with regards to the record that is kept in the State House? So, I mean, I presented this kind of long, but the signatures doesn't disappear. So if anyone wants to see how many signators or co-sponsors you have on a bill, there's access to know that. So I would like to know the purpose for having an additional 5 to the current, process that is there now, because you have access either way, whether you have 5 or 10 or 15 or 75.
So you're asking the fact that, if I may, you're asking, seeing as how if someone were to do a deep dive into the legislation, they would find all the sponsors, and you want to know why the top 10.
Right, because now you can go online and you can see the actual signatures, the prime sponsors and the co-sponsors, whether they're 5 or 25, that's listed on the bill. Is that not still correct?
I think you can do that. But I think, well, Representative Speakman?
Mr. Chairman, may I?
Absolutely.
My understanding is that those names are only on the piece of paper that travels with the bill and that they are held in committee. and that they are not available digitally. That is what my research indicated. And if you search for your name on the bill tracker, you will find only the bills that you are in the top 5 on. That's my understanding of how
I believe you're correct. However, I believe if you're looking for them, I understood that that bill with all the original signatures are scanned somehow where if you're looking for that information, you can retrieve it electronically. And I may be incorrect, but I know I have seen bills with the original signatures with more than 5 on it. So I don't know if that's still a practice.
Yeah, my understanding is that is the, yeah, sorry, I'm having some audio problems here. I don't know if you can hear me. Yes. Yes. My understanding is that you would not be able to find that. Or if a constituent were searching, they could not find that digitally.
Well, I recall, not to belabor this, but I recall being able to see the signatures beyond the 5. Whether it has been a process that's been omitted throughout the years or not, I don't know. But I was just curious, why 10 opposed to what it is if we have access to see the other signatures as well?
Chairwoman Williams, we'll look into that just to see what the detail is on that.
Thank you.
Chairman?
Thank you,
Any other
Chairman.
questions of Representative Speakman? No? Chairwoman Serpa.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Representative Speakman. I just wanted to express a concern about the timing of this suggestion, and I don't have a problem one way or the other with the number of signatures, but I've spoken to a number of colleagues who are really worried about getting a second, third, and fourth sponsor on bills, and I see some nodding in the room in this time of COVID. On the House floor, it was rather simple to find one another, and even that wasn't always easy to accomplish. But now that we're in the Veterans Auditorium, and I don't know how long we're going to be there, we're even further apart, and people scoot out before you get a chance to find them. And I've noticed with the few meetings we've had in the auditorium that people do, even in conversations, tend to stand far apart. So that's my only concern. And honestly, in my mind, I was thinking that the bills I put in, I may be the only signature on the bill. And I don't think that's any indication of the fact that there might be no support for it among my colleagues. But if 10 signatures are supposed to, are going to be allowed in the journal, I'm going to feel the pressure to get 9 more signatures when colleagues, frankly, might want me to stay away from them. That was
Mr.
just
Chairman?
a thought I had.
Yes, yeah, Representative Speakman, go ahead. I had something to add, but I have a feeling you're going to say it.
My understanding is that the Speaker and the Majority Leader are working on a system that will allow for electronic co-sponsor signatures. That's not quite ready, I think, to describe yet, but it's coming very, very quickly.
And that's exactly what I was going to say. I understand that they're working on a process by which signatures can be sent, can be made remotely for pieces of legislation.
And can I ask one more question,
Absolutely.
Chairman? And I don't know how that process is going to work, but it's still going to be incumbent upon the representative submitting the bill to check with Whip Kazarian, to check with Representative O'Brien. And are we going to be making 10 phone calls, only 9 other phone calls, because we feel compelled to, let's show 10 signatures? That's just my only concern. And I wouldn't want the public to assume that because I submit a bill only with my name, there's no support among the members. I mean, I can think of one bill that I've been trying to get passed on the other side for 3 years. The Scott Hornoff bill, I call it, compensating someone who's been unjustly imprisoned. That's passed unanimously for 2 years in a row, but I didn't get 74 other signatures on it. It's just a concern, and it's like just a pressure on me now. But I'd live with it if it passed.
Thank you, Chairwoman Serpa. Chairwoman Williams, our IT person, head of IT, Nick Bodano, just informed me that right now there are only 5 names that are searchable, and in the future there would be 10. So that would dovetail with Representative Speakman's legislation.
I understand that. What I'm saying, and I don't know how long he's been here and how far he dug in, I know that electronically, the bills, you could see the original signatures. I understand that it's only 5 that is listed for the general public to see. But if you wanted to see the original signatures, it was on electronically, because I know I've seen it.
Duly noted.
Thank you.
Any other questions of Representative Knight? I'm sorry, Representative Speakman. Okay, Representative Speakman, thank you very much for your participation this afternoon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Next, we have Representative Carson. Could we have
Thank you,
Representative Carson?
Thank you, Chairman. Can you hear me?
I can hear you perfectly, Representative Carson.
Good. Thank you very much. I wanted to to briefly give the members a little background as to how we came to the ideas around remote participation for the committees. Because I think that, during the time of COVID, there was a lot of frustration last year that we weren't meeting, and there was a lot of interest in meeting as quickly as possible remotely. And I want to commend the Speaker and the Leader, who very quickly after their election by the Democratic caucus in November, they quickly asked Representative Speakman, Cortland, and I to really dig into this issue. And I want the members to know that the more we dug into the issue and peeled back the onion, the more we learned how complicated it is. I want to commend the IT and Capitol TV staff. They really have done a fantastic job in bringing us up to speed quickly. We learned that there's limitations on IT, there's limitations on our software, there were some legal constraints, we'd be working in different locations. And as I was preparing my remarks this morning, it came to my mind, that we're really expanding this lively experiment in Rhode Island by enabling our committees to meet online. I want folks to know that we're on a learning curve, that the committees that have met in the past 6 months remotely have done a fantastic job. But as we move into this next phase, where we'll be hearing bills and having public participation, we will be on a learning curve. And there will be some limitations as to how many committee meetings we can schedule in a day. We now have more committees. We have a limited staff. They're at RIC, they're at the vets. They're trying to staff people. So I guess I'm asking the members of the committee, as well as our colleagues that are listening, to really be patient with this system as we implement it. I think scheduling will become critical. I think, the Speaker has suggested meeting on Mondays with committees, 2 committee meetings during the week, which are all ideas that came out of our work group when we realized what the constraints were. So I really want to share that with people. There's another aspect to this. There's 2 more comments I want to make. One was that we did thoroughly examine how we could have floor sessions be remote, and that was kind of clumsy, in all honesty. And I think that the Speaker and the Leader decided not to add that into this bill at that time. And I think that they were probably right. We really went back and forth on that for a while. So for members that are asking why there's no remote floor sessions in this, it was just very challenging to try to make that happen very quickly. And the final thing I want to say is that we also examined some software options that would really redesign and recalculate our entire legislative workflow. We looked at 3 pieces of software that are being developed nationally, one being used by the Massachusetts legislature, one being used by Oregon, one being used by the Democratic caucus of the House of Representatives. And they were pieces of software that would really put our entire process online. And the Speaker and the Leader, were happy to have us report on that. And I think that may be coming in our future, maybe next year, a further examination of that kind of software and that kind of technology, and maybe the new committee will take that on. But we really did a very thorough search. I want to thank the IT staff, the legal staff, and Terry and June for really pitching in, and I really wanted the members to understand all the work we did. So here's to a successful digital committee process for 2021.
Representative Carson, thank you for all the work you've done, and Representative Speakman and Representative Cotrevin. You've done yeoman's work with regard to this, and I think you should be commended for your endeavors. Any questions of Representative Carson? Okay, Representative Carson, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Oh, next we'll have Representative Cotrevin.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Chairman, for recognizing me. And Representative Carson pretty much summed up the extent of our work. And so I'll just echo her comments and applaud the IT staff for all the work that they're doing in Capitol TV. And it became very clear to me that we need to take this step by step. And I think the way the rules are written, giving the leader or the speaker, our speaker, the ability to determine when the emergency is over, it's time to re-examine how these things work. And if, as Rep. Kislak said, if we want to expand upon them and put them in the rules in a more permanent nature. So I thank you for all the work you're doing, and thank you to Capitol TV and the IT staff again, because through our discussions with them, it's really clear that they endeavor to put out a real quality product, and we want to allow them to continue that. So thank you. And I'm in support of I applaud all the changes, the committee, the additions of the committee, the additions of additional names that Rep. Speakman put in. I think that's very important. I have been unable to find names beyond the first 5, and I have had constituents ask me, why didn't I see your name on this or that? So I think for our constituents, it's better for transparency's sake to allow more names be available so that our constituents know what we support and what we don't support. So thank you very much.
Representative Cotrevin, thank you very much. Any comments or questions? Thank you. So now we're going to turn to some of the members of the public. I think that concludes the testimony from any of the state reps. I'd like to start with Jocelyn Foy, board.
He's trying to get in touch with her, and she's not calling back.
Okay.
She has written testimony.
We have Mr. Brown on the phone. I can't hear you, but that wouldn't be unusual.
Yeah.
We have Stephen Brown.
Yes.
Stephen, how
Hello?
are you?
I'm fine, thank you.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you and to all the committee.
Before we called you, I said, could you get Stephen Brown on the phone? I said, I never thought I'd say those words.
Well, I want to wish everybody a Happy New Year, and it actually is good to see all of you and see all of you healthy. So,
well, Stephen, thank you, and a Happy New Year to you and yours. Stephen, if anyone does not know by now, is the Executive Director of the ACLU. Stephen, now you know you wish to testify on the changes before us today, so please proceed.
Thank you. I have submitted some fairly detailed written testimony. I obviously am not going to go through all that. There are a few specific points I do want to raise that are in the written testimony. There are 2 changes in particular that I want to talk about. But before that, I also want to encourage the committee to consider some of the other things that are in our written testimony, which is the new year is also a time to look at rules that have been in effect for a long time, or even a little while, and see if they warrant re-examination. And we've made some suggestions in our written testimony about that. I don't want to go into details. That's something you can read, but I hope that's something that's on the table.
Stephen,
Yes.
not to interrupt you, but I don't believe we have your written testimony in front of us.
Okay,
So you're gonna, we don't have it. I don't know when
Yeah,
you
but-
sent it or where you sent it, but we don't have it in front of us. Is there some way you could give us the salient points of your written testimony?
Yeah, that's all. Yes. So I sent it to the clerk this afternoon. I assume at some point it will be disseminated to the committee members.
About what time did that happen?
Maybe around 1 o'clock.
Okay. Well, we're gonna have to track that down, but let's continue.
Yeah, that's fine. And my interest in the verbal testimony is not to go over all that. I just wanted to point out to committee members that we do have comments in writing about that I would encourage people to see when they do actually get the written testimony.
Okay.
I would also encourage that the committee consider adopting as rules things that have become a practice but that aren't in the rules. One good example is what's happening now, which is the posting of public testimony on the legislature's website, which is a great improvement. I think that's fantastic, but it's the sort of thing that you might want to consider, formalizing in the rules. The two specific changes that I want to talk about are first, the new Rule 12N, which has been mentioned, which is the one that allows bills to be carried over to the next year. In theory, I think that is a great idea. As a lobbyist, it's often very frustrating to testify on a bill and then give the identical testimony on the same bill a year later. But I also want to raise a practical concern about how that actually plays out that I hope committee members will try to consider if there's another way to tweak this to deal with this issue. And the issue is this. A bill gets introduced now in 2021 in January. A hearing is held on it in March of this year. Under this rule, this bill could just sit there, and then maybe in May of 2022, it suddenly comes up again for a vote. A lot may have happened in a year. There may be a sub-A to the bill that's proposed a year and a half from now, and I think there needs to be some way to address this issue of such a long time passing between a hearing on a bill and when it actually then comes up for consideration in a year later, a year and a half later. So I wanted to just raise that issue and hope that committee members will consider if there's some tweaking that can be done to prevent that sort of thing from happening, because a lot can happen in a year and a half, and to leave the public out of the discussion for that lengthy period of time is, I think, problematic. The second issue I wanted to highlight is a rule. It's part of the new rule dealing with emergency meetings, and that is Rule 47A8. And that's the rule that provides that any technological failure that prevents or severely limits public access doesn't invalidate the remote meeting occurring or any action taken at the remote meeting. And that's something that's of great concern to us, because what that essentially says is if there's a technological problem that keeps the public entirely out of this public meeting, it's still okay for the meeting to go forward and for any actions taken at it to be allowed. It seems to us is that if there is that much of a severe technological break, that the public really is prevented from watching the committee, seeing what happens, that's a time to have a meeting rescheduled. So we would urge our opposition to that particular provision. With that, I'll end. I'll be glad to answer any questions, and I hope I will make sure that I can get the written testimony out to all of you, which has a few more issues. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Stephen. We may have a couple of questions.
Sure.
Representative Newberry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Actually, I have more of a comment. I do actually agree with the ACLU sometimes, believe it or not, about 50-50 maybe, something like that. No, but Mr. Stephen Brown, he raised a point that I had thought of in the past and I had not thought of earlier today. I like the idea of being able to carry over bills from one session to another because it streamlines the process, and we waste a lot of time on sort of controversial bills. We have lots of people come in, but we all know they're not going anywhere. the reality is legislation will pass or not pass in this building for a lot of different reasons, some good, some bad. That's just politics. But I do think his point that a bill, and it may be a good bill, but a bill that maybe is heard in March and then suddenly pops up in May for a vote, I don't know the solution to that, but I wonder if maybe we should think about, and we have time, by the way, we can pass this set of rules today, and this wouldn't be an issue until next year, but we may want to think about a way to find some kind of amendment. It may not be now, may not be next week, but some kind of amendment over the course of 2021 to maybe amend the rules and to protect or guard against those concerns. I think we ought to think about that.
Well, Representative Newberry, this is all kind of a brave new world, if you will, with regard to the technology and remote voting, proxies, et cetera. Rules stays in, the House Rules Committee can always meet at any time if someone puts in a bill, an amendment, et cetera. We can meet in 2022 if necessary, once we've fleshed out perhaps some of the bugs in the system. And I'm sure there's going to be bugs in the system. But I know that the leadership of the House is moving forward in a very altruistic way. They want to try to make it as easy as possible to get the job done, to get the people's work done. We may stumble across the way, but it won't be for any nefarious purpose. It will be for the fact that we're going into some new areas here. So if we have to make some correction factor along the way, then I'm sure we'll be able to do that. Any other questions of Stephen Brown? No. Stephen, thank you very much for your testimony today. It's always a pleasure.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Do we have Jocelyn Foy here? Okay. Keep trying Jocelyn Foy, please. Mr. Marion? John?
Yes.
Okay, we have John Marion from Common Cause. Welcome, John. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for having me. Long-time listener, first-time caller, as they say on Sports Talk Radio.
Well, you can tell you've been on WPRO for a while.
I'd like, yes.
Go ahead, John. Please proceed.
Great. So first, I'd like to talk about your bill 5002 or resolution and the 3 points, main changes in that that have been discussed already. The first being with respect to carrying over the first being the 3 new committees. I was glad to hear Representative Carson say that the leadership is putting some thought into how to schedule committee hearings, because the only problem with more committees is that you're going to have more overlap, which is going to make it harder for the public and for members of the House to attend all of them, especially with them moving online. It's going to be particularly tricky. The second change with respect to carrying over the bills that there was just some discussion about by Representative Newberry. The change I would suggest to carrying over the bills is as written, 5002 allows the sponsor to request a hearing in the second year, but it doesn't give them a right to have a hearing. And I would just tweak that to give them the right to have a hearing in the second year if they request one. Then finally, the new Rule 47, the temporary emergency procedures. I just have a few points to make about that. The first is it does reference that you have to meet as a body as a whole, a quorum in person. And it mentions Article 6, Section 6 of the state constitution. I really haven't seen a full analysis by either the House or the Senate of why the leadership believes that it's required by Article 6, Section 6 that you meet in person. We're not arguing that the full body should be allowed to meet remotely. We would just like to hear why you come to the conclusion that you can't meet remotely as a full body, because That quorum language in Article 6, Section 6 is boilerplate, and it is in several other state constitutions where their legislatures are meeting fully remotely. So we'd love to see an explanation of that. With respect to proxy voting, the best under the circumstances, unless an electronic system for remote voting can be established and it can be determined that that's constitutional. And again, I think if you're going to rule out some of these remote options for the body as a whole, it would be good to see the legal argument why they have to be ruled out. And then finally, with respect to committee meetings online, we really think it would be better, as much as it's nice to be with you by telephone, if you can get the technology working to have video for the witnesses, as you had for the three members of the House who participated remotely. We've seen municipal bodies be able to accommodate people using video, and they don't have the resources that the General Assembly has. So we'd like to see that happen. Next, I'd like to just very briefly, and I would just echo Steve Brown's comments about if the technology fails, the hearing should not continue. That is essentially like locking the doors to the State House, not letting the public or the press in if the technology fails. It's one thing if my Wi-Fi goes out. It's another thing if Capitol TV goes off the air. And we don't think that the rule should allow that. Next, I'd like to just very briefly touch on several of the other resolutions before you. We support 5003 that would go from 5 to 10 names to answer Representative Williams' question. They aren't available. You have to go to the committee clerk to get the signature page. I can tell you that, and in COVID that becomes even more challenging. So having more names publicly available will be great for the public. With respect to 5006, which is essentially Kislak's proposal for you meeting online, she does in her proposal not allow audio but requires video. As I said, we support. With respect to 5007, we do think there should be a vote when the rules are suspended so that members of the House are on record as having suspended the rules. With respect to 5008, the discharge petitions, just the brief history is this rule used to allow members who were circulating a discharge petition to walk it around the chamber and gather signatures. In retaliation for a discharge petition by then Representative Nick Gorham, a few years later, this rule was changed so that the discharge petition has to sit on the desk. We think it should be restored to what it was. And then finally, for 5011, I echo Representative Kislak's comments and Representative Newberry's comments that of all the bills to be accepted from the 24-hour rule, the budget bill is the most important bill. That 24-hour rule, which this committee enacted 2 years ago, has been a wonderful success, and much to this committee's credit. It was never suspended in the last 2 years, and the public and the members benefited greatly from 24 hours to see the sub-As, and we think that should be extended to the committee. So thank you for allowing me all that time, and I'm happy to take any questions.
I have one question. I was a little confused about what you said, what you suggested regarding hearings in the second year for a bill that's been held over. Are you saying there should be a hearing, there shouldn't be a hearing?
Thank you. I'm saying that as written, it says that, and I'm paraphrasing, but it says that the sponsor may request a hearing in the second year.
That's correct.
And what I'm suggesting is that be amended so that if the sponsor does request a hearing, it is granted automatically. And that would solve, I think, the problem that was articulated by several people of a bill that is introduced, say, this March, but starts, they want to bring it back in May of 2022. Well, the sponsor at that point can request a hearing in the second year of the bill's life, and it will get another vetting.
Okay, thank you. Any questions
Thank you.
of Mr. Marion? Leader Filippi.
Thank you, Chairman. Hi, Mr. Marion. I don't know what the speaker and leader's legal rationale is for not being able to convene remotely. The questions I have stem from a 1937 case called to certain members of the House of Representatives. It's also cited as in re Curvin for an opinion, and that's 58 RI 51. And it essentially said that in order for the House of Representatives to formally act, they must convene in a formal meeting. And the big outstanding question is whether a quorum can be attained via remote means. That Supreme Court decision can be read as requiring an actual formal convening in the common law tradition of everyone getting together in one specific place. So I don't know that you're going to find an exact on-point answer. I think you're just going to find a lot of question marks, and I think those question marks are the fear in that if we take some type of formal action, in a couple of years an attorney may claim, like they had done in a Monroe case probably 20 years after the case I cited, that the House of Representatives did not formally act and therefore the laws we passed were void. So you're not going to find a clear answer, just a bunch of big question marks which raises problems for us proceeding remotely. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And I've read that, and I would just counter with two things. One is obviously that's an advisory opinion, and I think you could ask for another advisory opinion of the current Supreme Court. And we've seen that in several states. In the state of Maryland, they asked for an advisory opinion from the Attorney General and received a lengthy letter back saying they couldn't meet remotely. And then the other issue is obviously it was from 1937, which predates, any of the technology we're talking about. Again, we're not advocating that you meet remotely as a body as a whole, just looking for some clarity for why you couldn't, partially in preparation for if you would need to, right? There might be emergencies where you couldn't meet as a body as a whole. One of the states that is meeting remotely, Wisconsin, actually had a commission that was very prescient several years ago, and it was a commission designed to prepare the legislature for the necessity of remote emergency meetings, and it explored some of the legal questions. So maybe this is a good one for a study commission.
John?
Yes.
Yeah, you realize with regard to the nuances of the technology as we go forward that this is in a sense, and I'm not trying to make an excuse in advance, but you do realize that this is a work in progress.
Absolutely, Mr. Chairman. And we've seen, I've been involved helping municipalities move their public meetings online, and we've seen stumbles by municipalities, and they've gotten much better. And I respect that the House and the Senate are going to have some stumbles in the next couple of weeks and months. And I look forward to helping you work through them.
Well, Mr. Marion, we always appreciate your input. I believe Chairwoman Williams has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Maybe not necessarily a question, but a correction with regards to Mr. Marion. For the record, what I presented with regards to the signature and seeing it online, I was correct. I was informed that you cannot search for it, but it is available. And maybe the solution to that issue may be that IT finds a way that if anyone wants to see all of the signatures on the bills, they will be able to access it by having a system set up for them to search for that specifically, opposed to saying that maybe you didn't say this, but I certainly felt by your statement that I may be incorrect, that the only way that one can see the bills with the signatures on it is in the office of the clerk, which unfortunately, that is not the only way. I repeat, because I saw it, and it was electronically that I saw it. So the solution, I would say, may be for a system to be set up where you can search to see who all signed up on the bill, instead of just having the 5 or the 10 recorded for you to search and see. For the record, Mr. Merriam.
Thank you, Chairman. And that would be wonderful if that technology could be made available.
Thank you, Mr. Marion. Thank you, Chairwoman Williams.
Thank you.
Any other questions of Mr. Marion? Well, John, I guess that concludes your testimony for the day.
Thank you.
And thank you for your participation today. Next, I think our final, we have Jocelyn Foy, Board President and Executive Director of the Woman Project. Do we have her on?
Yes, you do.
Jocelyn Foy, welcome to House Rules. Thank you for joining us today. Please proceed.
Okay, well, thank you for helping with all of the technical wherewithal. Good evening, Chairman Corvese and members of the House Rules Committee. It's nice to see you on my computer, but speak to you through my phone, so we sort of see you. My name is Jocelyn Foy. My preferred pronouns are she, her. I live in Wakefield, Rhode Island, and I am the Executive Director, as you said before, of the Woman Project. I am speaking in support of House Resolutions 5006, 5007, 5008, 5009, 5010, and 5011. So the Women Project, just if anyone doesn't know, is a grassroots organization founded in 2017 by a group of Rhode Island organizers and local artists who wanted to take a fresh approach to sexual and reproductive rights advocacy that harnessed the power of art, activism, and advocacy. From 2017 to 2019, the Woman Project focused on the passage of the Reproductive Privacy Act, as you might know. Our approach has been incorporating grassroots mobilization, artistic activism, and educational campaigns. Rhode Islanders have engaged with us greatly because it acts boldly and centers the needs of those often overlooked by racist and sexist institutions. On November 17th, 2020, the Woman Project, along with 41 diverse organizations, sent a letter to every member and member-elect of the Rhode Island General Assembly calling for change and demanding an open, accessible, and engaging process for the 2021 legislative session. I hope that you received that, but I also submitted that again as a piece of this process. We cannot dismantle systemic and institutional racism if we exclude people from the legislative process. Current legislative processes do just that at times. We must use this extraordinary moment in our history to rethink how our institutions function and make them better to meet the needs we have now to improve the participation engagement in the future. So Representative Kislak's resolutions address some of these issues raised in our letter and other issues which also improve the democratic process. For Resolution 5006, I cannot emphasize how important this ruling change is for Rhode Islanders from our standpoint, as well as the 41 other organizations. A well-functioning democracy requires the active participation of the people. The Woman Project has substantial experience mobilizing Rhode Islanders to engage in this process at the State House. We've observed firsthand the barriers to access many Rhode Islanders face when engaging in the legislative process. In the past, working folks, disabled individuals, and lower income folks have struggled to participate in these hearings. I have coordinated transportation for those who do not or cannot drive to the State House many a time. We have watched other children so that someone could testify. The pandemic and public health concerns have only compounded these barriers. Allowing remote voting for House committees is the sensible response to public health concerns. Allowing video testimony for the public will greatly expand access by eliminating the need to get to the State House. It also allows the juggling work and family an earlier method, an easier method to participate. I will note that I am calling you from my day job at an office building. For House Resolution 5007, requiring the consent of the majority and minority leaders to suspend the rules creates an unnecessary hurdle to change, placing one or two individual lawmakers on a position to foreclose the will of the majority is anti-democratic from our position. So for 5008 through 5010, House rules each serve to remove procedural barriers that prevent an expedite process for bills to become law. There's no value letting bills languish. Regarding House Resolution 5008, there's no reason to push the term. Regarding House Resolution 5009, too often bills enter limbo after they're passed out of committee. Bills that have been passed out of committee should be placed on the floor calendar for a vote expeditiously. Rhode Islanders deserve to know, on the record, how the representatives stand on bills that have been passed out of committee. And finally, House Resolution 5010 helps to remove the sting of the held for further study bill classification. As we have seen with numerous good bills, once the bill is quote unquote held for further study, it effectively kills the bill by preventing any legislative action on the bill going forward that session. By allowing the bill's prime sponsor to request reconsideration of the bill by the committee, the bill will get an opportunity to leave committee to receive a floor vote. So finally, House Resolution 5011. The Rhode Island budget is the single most important bill that the General Assembly must contend with each session. The budget bill is usually hundreds of pages in length and contains provisions that affect every Rhode Islander. And yet, the budget is exempt from the requirements that bills must be noticed at least 24 hours before the vote on the bill is held. Legislators, the media, the ordinary Rhode Islander should be allowed time to clarify, carefully review each provision before the vote is scheduled. The 24-hour waiting period should also apply to the budget from our position. So in conclusion, the House has the opportunity and the obligation to reimagine how participatory democracy works in our state. I sincerely hope that this resolution passes and may remain in place long after the pandemic has ceased, and that's a really important part of our point here as well. Now is the time to remove obstacles, ensure the legislative process is inclusive of all voices, and clear procedural barriers from the path of the bill to a law. Thank you all for hearing me up today.
Thank you, Ms. Foy. Does anyone have a question of the witness? Well, Ms. Foy, thank you for your participation. We have your written testimony also. We'll put that in the
Great.
record. And
Thanks so much.
And we thank you for your participation.
Thank you.
Before we call the last, which I believe is the last witness today, I just wanted, for the record, and I'm sure the clerk has copies of this so they can go in the record. We have some testimony that has been sent in from individuals, interested parties, and I just want to mention that we have received some testimony from a Jan Chapin, who lives in Providence, and this individual supports House 5002, 5003, 5004, 5006, 5007, 5008, 5009, 5010, 5011, but would like to change 5012 from 12 years to 8 years. We also have testimony, we also have written testimony from Bella Robinson of Coyote, Rhode Island, who supports 5006, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11. We also have Sean Hagberg, PhD, clinical assistant, professor of neurosurgery, who is supporting 5006, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11. We also have written testimony from a Claudette Barrel in Charlestown, who also supports 5006, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11. And we also had a letter from, was on the stationery of the Women's Project, but was signed by a number of organizations. Basically, if I've read this correctly, and I read it quickly because I only received it today, basically dovetailing with what Jocelyn Foy had testified. And the organization signing it was not an individual, but the organization is signing it the Anti-Racist CPSED, ARISE, Alliance of Rhode Island Southeast Asians for Education, Black Lives Matter Rhode Island PAC, Brown College Democrats, Kane I Walk, Carpenters Local Union 330, Chapel Street UCC, Coalition for a Multilingual Rhode Island, Coyote Rhode Island, DARE, the Feinstein Institute for Public Service, the formerly incarcerated Union of Rhode Island, Gen Z, We Want to Live, Humanists of Rhode Island, LGBTQ Action Rhode Island, Mental Health Recovery Coalition of Rhode Island, North Kingstown Neighborhood Action for Black Lives, Adjourn 3I, Our Revolution Rhode Island, Parents Leading for Educational Equity, Physicians for a National Health Program, Rhode Island Chapter, Reclaim Rhode Island, Refugee Dream Center, Rhode Island Council for Muslim Advancement, Rhode Island Democratic Party LGBTQ Caucus, Rhode Island Democratic Women's Caucus, Rhode Island Healthcare Access and Affordability Partnership, the Rhode Island Interfaith Coalition to Reduce Poverty, Rhode Island State Council of Churches, Rhode Island Wellness Center, Rhode Island Wellness Society, Sierra Club of Rhode Island, Sister Fire, Sunrise Providence, Swing Left Rhode Island, the South County Huddle, the Woman Project, Uprise Rhode Island, and the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of South County and the Women's Fund of Rhode Island. So I wanted to make sure that all the individuals and groups that had submitted testimony were on the record, that we have received their letters. And I thank all those who participated. Last but not least, for testimony today, we have Randall Rose. Do we have him on? We do not. Randall Rose, are you there?
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Rose. How are you today?
Fine, thank you.
Happy New Year and welcome to House Rules. Please proceed.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. So let me start first on House Bill 5002. Can you hear me here?
We can.
Okay, good. So very well, thank you, and I hope you're well.
We are. Thank you.
Okay, I've got a little bit of a delay on here, so I hope things are coming through okay.
You're coming in loud and clear, Mr. Rose. Please proceed with your testimony.
Thank you. Okay, so in House Bill 5002, the main rules bill, I have a number of concerns. One concern that has not been raised yet is that the bill talks about holding sessions remotely, which is a good idea during a public health emergency, and unfortunately, it also allows the public to be kept out of in-person hearings, even when there's no public health emergency. It gives full discretion to the speaker to keep the public out of the State House, out of attending hearings, even when there's no emergency. If there's, and I think that the public should be able to come to the State House and testify, even if it's a controversial bill, even if the public is upset. And I would prefer, right now the language says that if the speaker in his own discretion determines that there's some unspecified risk to the health and safety of members and staff of the House, then the public can be kept out of the State House. I think if there's no public health emergency, the State House should be open. I know that some groups in Rhode Island have been stereotyped. There are stereotypes that Muslims are somehow threats to people's safety, or sometimes there's the stereotype that black protesters are a threat to people's safety.
Mr. Rose?
I don't think there should be vague language there about a threat to people's safety. I think it should just be if there's a public health emergency, things can be held remotely, but otherwise the public should be allowed in the State House.
Mr. Rose,
yes.
Mr. Rose, if you don't mind me interrupting you just for a moment. Keep in mind that these are temporary procedures that the Speaker would invoke because of a public emergency. That's in the new rules. There's no attempt here to change the rules when there is no public health emergency or no or other emergency.
I will just read the language because I did look at the language carefully. The language says that.
Could you tell us what page that is on the bill so we could all take a look at it?
Certainly, Mr. Chair. This is page 24, lines 26 and following. It says, and even though it's called temporary, this can be invoked at any time, any number of years in the future. It says on line 26 of page 24, the Speaker shall have the discretion to determine if there exists a public health or other emergency that could pose a risk to the health and safety of members and staff of the House. As far as I can see, there's very little of that that places binding limits on that requires it to be only a public health emergency. In fact, it says it doesn't have to be a public health emergency. It could be anything that the Speaker deems to be an emergency.
But it does say an emergency. I with all due respect, I don't think there's a Trojan horse here.
I understand your view, and that's fine. But I see the word emergency, but I also see the Speaker shall have the discretion. And when the criterion given is when the Speaker's discretion determines that something is a risk to the safety of members of the House and staff of the House, I worry about the public being kept out of the State House just because people are angry about a bill, and there may be some overreaction in deeming the public to be a threat to the safety of members of the House. I think there's no need to keep the public out of the State House if there's no health emergency, because we have medical detectives, we have Capitol Police, even if the public is upset about a bill, it shouldn't be deemed to be a risk to the safety of a member of the House that justifies keeping the public out of the State House. It's already been too long that the public has been not allowed to enter the State House, and I understand that's fine during COVID, during a pandemic, but if there's no public health emergency, I don't think the Speaker should have discretion. So that is my objection.
Your perspective and take on this will be noted.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So let me continue. There's also when a member is unable to attend for health reasons, the bill, this is still H 5002, allows the member to vote by proxy, but there's the fine print when the House member votes by proxy. It says, if a House member is too sick to attend or can't attend for health reasons and wants to vote by proxy, the House member must agree to the fine print that allows the majority or minority leader to cast votes on floor amendments according to the majority or minority leader's discretion. So basically, the majority or minority leader gets to cast 2 votes on any floor amendment or parliamentary procedure matter. When there's an absent member, the majority or minority leader would not have to follow the will of the absent member when casting votes on floor amendments and procedural votes. The majority or minority leader could just cast that absent member's votes in whatever way they want. And I believe that the voters have elected representatives in their districts so that they can be represented by the representative they chose. That representative's vote should not be transferred over to the majority or minority leader to cast as the leader wants. So the absent representative can sign a proxy agreement. He can agree to have somebody else cast the votes that he asks for. If he wants to vote yes on a bill or no on a bill, then fine, he can have the leader do that, but that should not be taken as license for the leader to substitute his own judgment on floor amendments or procedural votes.
Mr. Rose,
Yes.
Rose, excuse me, there is going to be a question, but before I have a Speaker Pro Tem Kennedy ask the question, Representative Kislak basically touched upon this in her testimony with regard to the proxies and the majority and the minority leaders casting votes. So that has been brought up as a question. But I'd like to turn it over to Speaker Pro Tem Kennedy. He has a question for you at this point.
Yeah, Randall. As was just pointed out by the chairman, this was addressed in Representative Kislak's presentation earlier. At the same time, I think the House leadership is taking a giant step forward, because traditionally, if a person was sick, they would not get to vote, period. Now, I can understand you're quibbling over, a potential amendment or some other issue. The reality is, this is a major step to allow those legislators who are sick the opportunity to actually weigh in and vote on that day's business within the General Assembly. And I think that is something that should be applauded, instead of quibbling over what a potential amendment is and how Leader Filippi would vote on it for that particular individual, or how Leader Blazejewski would vote on it.
Thank you, and I take that point. It is a good idea to change the rules to allow proxy votes. But proxy votes are legitimate when the representative who has to be absent says how they want their vote to be cast in their absence. Unfortunately, under the rules that are being proposed for adoption today, if a representative has to be absent for health reasons, and they say, I want to vote yes on this bill, no on that bill, and so on, the price of letting someone vote for them by proxy is they have to turn, under these proposed rule changes, the absent representative has to turn over to Representative Blazejewski or Representative Filippi, has to turn over to the majority or minority leaders the sole choice about whether their vote will be counted for or against the floor amendment. So the absent rep doesn't get to vote their own views on a floor amendment. They don't get to vote their constituents' views. When they agree to cast a proxy vote under these proposed rule changes, they're signing over in the fine print, they're signing over to the majority or minority leader full power to cast a vote for them on floor amendments and parliamentary votes, even if that wasn't what they wanted. So it takes away the representative's ability to represent their constituents, and that is not what a legislature should be about. So I'd be fine with proxy voting if it wasn't for this, but I think this passage that I'm talking about, which is on page 26, lines 9 to 11, it should be changed. Instead of forcing a member by proxy to give away their vote to the majority and minority leaders, it should say a member voting by proxy may choose to grant. I mean, this isn't a situation where you're a customer and you have to sign legalese that signs away all your rights to a company. This is a person who is elected to represent the people of their district, and they should not be forced by House rules to sign away their discretion in how to vote. I believe that this is even a violation of the Rhode Island State Constitution. Because it's members were elected to cast votes as they choose, hopefully in representing the people of their district. There's nothing in the Rhode Island Constitution that says members can be forced under some circumstances to sign away their discretion about how they want to vote on certain matters as the price of voting by proxy. So I believe this is unconstitutional, and even apart from that, is undemocratic. But I'd be, if there are no further discussion on that point, I want to move on to the next point.
Maybe we should ask how many points he has.
Okay, so just moving on a little further.
You can proceed, Mr. Rose.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So just moving on a little further, I agree with what previous witnesses have said, that when there's a remote committee hearing, the public should be able to testify on the same basis as other participants. If legislators are participating by video, the public should participate by video. That's what's done at the city level. And if the technology fails, the hearing shouldn't continue. I agree about that. And about bills being held over from one year to another, currently the rule is if a bill doesn't pass 1 year, it needs to have a hearing the next year. And I think that's a good system for the reasons that Steve Brown said. You don't want to have a bill suddenly come up for passage when there's been no hearing in the last year. The last hearing might have been 15 months ago. Under our current system, every bill that's passed in a given year has to have had a hearing that year, and I think that should be retained in the new year, in the new rule changes. These proposed rule changes say that a bill can be passed in an election year without having had a hearing that year. I think there should be a hearing scheduled, certainly if the sponsor asks for it, but I would say even if the sponsor doesn't ask for it, there should be a requirement for a hearing that same year, and it could be very early in the legislative session at a time that's convenient for people, but it should be a requirement. So those are all my comments on House Bill 5002. And I will note that House Bill 5006, that's attracted a lot of support, is better on the requirements for remote hearings. I think I fully support House Bill 5006, which gets these matters right, I believe. On the other bills, just very briefly, because they've been treated already, I do support especially House Bill 5011, which requires that the public gets to see the state budget before it is reported out of the Finance Committee. There should be the same 24-hour notice that before a bill is voted on the committee. For every other bill, we do require that it should be available to the public for 24 hours before it's voted on in committee. That should be done for the budget as well, because right now the way the budget is passed is it's just drafted without any transparency. The public doesn't see what's in the bill until it's suddenly unveiled, and then it's immediately passed out to committee. That's really undemocratic. It's just a bill that's written from the top down, and there's no opportunity for the public to see what's there and try to call their representatives on that committee, because basically it's sending the message that the House does not want members of the public to have any input in this process before it comes out of committee. Often when the budget is suddenly unveiled, there are provisions in there that nobody has seen before, and the public just has no time to react. So that's the most important of these other bills that I support. I really think that that would be a real improvement, just following the same standard for the budget as we follow for less important bills, because there is no hurry to pass the budget. We have a pattern where we've always passed the budget in plenty of time. It's not like there's a rush to pass it. The only reason why the budget is suddenly unveiled without the usual 24-hour notice in our current practice is just to keep the public's input out of it. So that really needs to be changed. The other bills, I do support most of the other bills, although I realize they're not going to fix all the issues that people have had with the House rules. On House 5007, I do agree with Mr. Marion and others that the majority and minority leaders should not be able on their own to suspend the House rules. There are very important protections in the House rules to make sure that the process is somewhat transparent, to make sure the process is somewhat democratic. And there have been many years when the House rules have been suddenly suspended near the end of the legislative session in June. The House rules have been suddenly suspended, and the public is then kept in the dark. And if you're going to suspend the House rules, it should take a full 2/3 vote of the House. It should not be something that could be done just with a handshake between the majority leader and the minority leader. So House Bill 5007 would be a big improvement. It will help to make sure that we don't get these midnight sessions where the rules go out the window unless 2/3 of the House reps agree. I also support the bill on the discharge petition, House Bill 5008, allowing bills to pass when the Speaker is not supporting them. Mr. Marion went through the good reasons for that. I do support House Bill 5003 that allows the public to see more of the co-sponsors. I don't think it's a good idea that the public can only see 5 sponsors on a given bill. Anything that would make the number of co-sponsors more, anything that could make the list of co-sponsors more visible to the public would be better. So for House Bill 5003 is an improvement. I support House Bill 5004 that says that each elected representative has to be assigned to not just one committee, at least 2 committees, because voters elect their representatives to participate in the work of the General Assembly. It's hard to participate if you're only on one committee or no committees, and if each committee has had its fair share of reps, then each rep would be on multiple committees. So that should be a rule. Each rep should be at least on 2 committees, or maybe I would also support something stricter like what the Senate does, requiring each individual legislator to be on one of the top 4 committees. And finally, I support House Bill 5010, which makes clear that bills that are held for further study can be reactivated. To the extent that that's not already in practice, I support passing House Bill 5010. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
I want to thank you very much for your input this afternoon, Mr. Rose. Any questions of Mr. Rose? All right, thank you, Mr. Rose.
Thank you.
I believe that concludes today's proceedings and today's testimony. Am I correct? Therefore, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
By Speaker Pro Tem Kennedy, as seconded by First Vice Chairman O'Brien, Second Vice Chairman Villa Wilkinson. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? The ayes have it.